One's got to remember that Boris Johnson is to political comebacks what Lazarus was to biblical resurrections: frequent, improbable, and faintly miraculous. And the question is not whether he will attempt to return to frontline politics, but rather when and under what circumstances. His kitchen comment this week, dismissing the idea with a wry reference to book writing and home renovations, was not a denial, but a teaser. And Boris Johnson doesn't close doors, he leaves them enticingly ajar. And his allies now whisper of unfinished business. His boredom is palpable. While he enjoys the financial windfall of speeches and memoirs, Johnson is not a man content with retirement. His attendance at the Munich Security Conference, his regular dialogues with Trump and Zelensky, his discreet policy discussions with former cabinet colleagues all indicate a man who has not stepped away from the political chessboard. If anything, he's repositioning his pieces and theirs. His memoir, Unleashed, is another case in point. It doesn't read like a political epithet, but as an unfinished symphony, a meticulous effort to rehabilitate his record, shift blame, remind the electorate what they have lost, what they're missing, and the polls, what they're missing. And the polls suggest that his image, while still negative, is improving at -17. His approval rate is better than Liz Truss, -45, better than Rishi Sunak, -22. In a political landscape where Reform UK is outpacing the Tories, a return to Johnson is not just conceivable, but logical. And when the party seeks a Hail Mary, they will turn, as they have before, to Boris. The Conservative Party is in existential chaos. With Labour in a precarious lead, Reform UK surging ahead, Tory MPs, particularly those facing an electoral extinction, may look for a figure capable of revitalising their fortunes, or at least saving them. Boris remains the only figure in the Conservative movement with media magnetism and the broad electoral reach to challenge Farage. His 2019 pact with Farage delivered a thumping Tory majority, and history has a habit of repeating itself. A precedent exists, too. Winston Churchill returned to Downing Street after a political exile. Johnson, who has always seen himself as Churchill's natural heir, is undoubtedly contemplating a parallel story. The allure of a dramatic return, casting himself as the only man capable of staving off electoral disaster, is almost too tempting to resist. Johnson's route back would require an MP's seat. He would need the blessing of Kemi Badenoch, the current Tory leader, or a party desperate enough to sideline her in favour of a man who can save the party. A by-election in a safe Conservative seat would be the most plausible entry point. Uxbridge and South Ruislip, now in Labour's hands, is an unlikely choice. A more secure Tory-held constituency with a retiring MP would be preferable, and the local Conservative Association would likely welcome him with open arms, especially given his track record of electoral success. Of course, his return would come with baggage. Partygate, the forced resignation, the sense of political chaos he left behind are factors that will not be forgotten. Yet Johnson is a master of narrative control, and the scandal of yesterday is the footnote of tomorrow. He'll paint himself as the victim of political betrayal, the one man who could have delivered Brexit prosperity if only his colleagues had not succumbed to treachery and self-harm. Despite his undeniable political prowess, there are obstacles. The Tory leadership under Badenoch may resist his re-entry. His personal brand remains divisive. Immigration, an issue he largely ignored, has become a defining point of the new Conservative and Reform axis. His historical liberal tendencies may not sit well with the party's more hardened right wing. Moreover, the electorate may not be as willing to forgive and forget as he might hope. Yet Johnson's calculation is different. He thrives on chaos. He operates best when underestimated. His entire career is built on proving the naysayers wrong. His supporters will argue that in a battle for media dominance against Farage, no one is better equipped. If the ball comes loose at the back of the scrum, Johnson will not hesitate. Boris Johnson's return to mainstream politics is not a far-fetched fantasy. It's a probability. Whether it is an immediate leadership challenge, a post-electoral rebuilding of the Tories, or a new political project in alliance with Reform UK, Johnson will not fade into irrelevance. He will be watching, waiting, and at the right moment striking. He might even strike from the House of Lords. British politics, after all, rarely allows its most colourful figures to retire quietly, and Boris Johnson of all people, is not one for a back exit.